The topic of today's discussion is an LLC, is a limited liability company, the same thing as a self-settled trust? Now, let me take a couple of steps back and give some explanations. A self-settled trust is typically shorthand for something called a self-settled spendthrift trust. And that means it's a trust that you create, you're the beneficiary of the trust, and you put fancy language inside the trust saying that the assets inside the trust can't be taken away from you. Now, here's the interesting thing. For the longest time, self-settled spendthrift trusts were not allowed in America. And then some offshore jurisdictions sprang up and they started allowing self-settled spendthrift trusts. And then some U.S. States started allowing self-settled spendthrift trusts. And so as a result of these states now starting to allow these self-settled spendthrift trusts, and I sure hope I don't have to say that too many times, it's a tongue-tangler, but as a result of the states allowing those sorts of trusts, whenever the bankruptcy code was modified in 2005, they had a provision inside there saying that if anybody makes a transfer to a self-settled spendthrift trust in the last 10 years, those assets could be grabbed back. And the provisions were it had to meet four elements. Four things had to happen before those assets were grabbed back. One, the transfer was to a self-settled trust. Two, the transfer was made by the bankruptcy debtor. Three, the debtor must be the beneficiary of the transfer, thus the self-settled part. And four, there must be an actual intent to hinder, delay, or defraud. And by the way, they have various factors they look at to see if there was an intent to delay, hinder, or defraud. So, let's go back to the main discussion how I started this off. Is an LLC considered a self-settled spendthrift trust, or, and this is where the bankruptcy code kind of gets in there and it's a little bit gray, if the transfer was to a self-settled spendthrift trust or a similar device? So really the question is a limited liability company similar to a self-settled spendthrift trust? Well, in this particular case, it's a really interesting case out of, I believe it was Illinois. Yeah, it was the Southern District of Illinois, the bankruptcy court. And the debtor was Porco Inc. You got to love that word, by the way, Porco, in the context of somebody trying to move assets to have them protected. What's the age-old phrase? Bears make money, bulls make money, hogs get slaughtered. And fact pattern in this particular thing, it's really long and convoluted, but at the end of the day, one of the shareholders of Porco was the owner of an LLC in which some ownership of real estate of which Porco had at one time or another had been transferred into it. So now the judgment creditors, the people trying to go after the assets, Quality Meat Products, was trying to assert that what Porco did was wrong and that they basically transferred the assets into a device that was similar to a self-settled spendthrift trust, in this case, the LLC. Well, the bankruptcy judge did a good job going through what all the bankruptcy judges do, and they were going into in-depth into trust law, etc., so forth. And the bottom line is, in this particular case, in the Southern District of Illinois at least, an LLC is not considered a similar device to a self-settled spendthrift trust, so transfers to the LLCs within a 10-year time period presumably will not be clawed back. Now, once again, this case was strictly for the Southern District of Illinois. Other districts of Illinois are not bound by this decision. Other states are not bound by this decision. But nonetheless, it was an interesting decision because it's pretty much the first decision regarding the definition of a similar device to a self-settled spendthrift trust.